You know, history is usually this long list of dates and battles, right? But what if you could look at a whole century of conflict as just one single ongoing struggle? Well, that's the powerful idea we're diving into today, all through the eyes of one author who calls it Korea's 100-Year War.
So where does this story even begin? Not with some dusty treaty or a famous battle, but with the author's mother. This quote, it's our anchor. It takes this huge, complicated history and ties it to a single human life. It's asking us to feel the sheer weight of it all: colonization, division, war, all through the experience of one person.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? How can one life possibly tell the story of an entire nation's struggle? Well, for this author, the answer isn't about losing territory or government. No, it's about losing something way, way deeper: the nation's very soul.
Okay, so our first stop is this idea of loss. The author argues that what happened more than 100 years ago wasn't just a political defeat. It was, for all intents and purposes, a spiritual collapse.
The key term here, the one you really need to get, is Gushimjeom. Now, this doesn't just mean government or capital city. Think of it more like a nation's center of gravity. It's that spiritual, psychological thing that gives a people its identity, its purpose, its will to exist as one.
And here's where the author makes a really crucial point. They say the biggest crime wasn't just losing the nation, it was how it was lost. It wasn't conquered in some epic battle. It was, and I'm quoting here, sold off, betrayed from the inside. And that sudden vanishing act is what created this deep, deep trauma, this feeling of being cut loose, with no center to hold on to.
And just look at how fast this all went down. I mean, it's shocking. In 1905, the nation's diplomatic rights are just handed over. And then, boom. Only 5 years later, in 1910, the country is officially gone from the map. The author really hammers this point home. It felt like in the blink of an eye, everything just vanished, leaving people completely adrift.
But, this isn't just a story about loss. The next chapter is all about the fight back. It's about trying to build a new center from the absolute ashes of the old one. For nearly a decade after the annexation, people just lived with this trauma. But then, this here happened. 1919. This was the turning point. On March 1st, 1919, the author describes it as an explosion. All that pent-up pain and hope just erupted. A massive, non-violent movement for independence swept across the entire peninsula. Now, it was brutally suppressed, but it changed everything. It was like a declaration to the world that the Korean spirit was not broken, and it forced patriots to take the fight for independence overseas.
And this is what they came up with. The author is really honest about it, calling it shabby and abstract. I mean, think about it. It had no land, no army, no money. But what it did have was huge symbolic power. It became the new Gushimjeom, that new focal point that the independence movement could rally around.
So you can see this massive psychological shift here, right? Before 1919, you have a lost focal point, a national trauma. But after 1919, a new one is forged, and the path to healing can finally begin. The people weren't just second-class citizens anymore. Through this new government, they had effectively declared war on the empire that tried to wipe them out.
Okay, so this is where it all comes together. For the author, this is not just a history lesson. The whole point of walking us through this century-old struggle is to sound a very loud alarm about today. From the author's point of view, this war, for the nation's core, for its Gushimjeom, it never actually ended. They're basically arguing that the past isn't even past. It's a parallel story that's still unfolding right now, as we speak. And here is the author's direct and pretty chilling parallel. They draw a straight line from the historical traders who sold out the nation's core to what they see as modern forces threatening that very same core today. The warning is crystal clear. The risk of losing that focal point again is real, and that could mean repeating the nightmare of the past. And so, that's where the author leaves us, with this incredibly powerful and challenging question. It completely reframes this entire history. It's not just something to memorize for a test. It's a lesson with urgent modern-day stakes, and it's asking you and me to think about what really holds a nation together and what we have to do to make sure its core is never, ever lost again.